You saw the footage of what happened with George Floyd. You're in this world. What do you think about what Derek Chauvin did himself?
This was a travesty for the entire country. My heart breaks for the Floyd family and for what happened. That was awful. There's nothing you can show me that would justify that action. Nobody dislikes a bad cop more than a good cop.
The show Live PD is going to be taken down.
It was a shock to me. It was the #1 cable TV show for a long time. This riot and looting and what's going on in Washington, this nonsense has to stop. These same people that are out protesting right now, they don't have the balls to come out and do this job. There has been bad leadership in law enforcement that has created distrust.
What does the word defund the police mean to you?
Most of the people out there asking to defund police have no concept of what they're talking about. Police across this country have been defunded. You want to know what the problem is? It's weak leadership. Decades of piss poor leadership.
So yesterday I sent a tweet out saying Cops TV show canceled after 32 years. Lego halted city police station. A&E pulled Live PD from schedule. And now they're talking about Paw Patrol. And I have 2 boys and they love Paw Patrol. And I said, listen, why don't we have somebody come and be a guest from Live PD? And then Josh, our friend, contacted the 24th Sheriff of Pinal County in Arizona, Sheriff Mark Lamb, who is one of the stars on the show Live PD that gets 2.1 million regular viewers. And this show has had, I believe, nearly 300 episodes, 298 episodes. He runs a $39 million budget, which covers all aspects of the sheriff's office. I think roughly 650 employees, the size of Connecticut. His county where he's at is the size of Connecticut. With that being said, Sheriff Mark Lamb, thank you so much for being a guest on Valuetainment.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So, obviously the tragic events that happened a couple weeks ago with the video going viral, and then you're seeing the 4 cops and the handling of it, and it infuriated everybody to the point where media picked it up and there was riots, protesting. That happens a couple weeks ago. When did you kind of get the news that with what is going on today, the show Live PD is going to be taken down?
I literally was on a Zoom call Tuesday night. We were talking about Wanted, actually, the Live PD Wanted. And we just assumed Live PD was going to be on. The next night, I was out with some congressmen down on the south end of our county, looking at some border issues, and had about 4 messages when I got through with the congressman, and every one of them was about how Live PD was canceled. So it was a shock to me. Obviously, I'm disappointed because I think we need some positive police stuff now more than ever. But, I'm not on that end. I don't know what all the reasons are why they did that. So.
Also, there wasn't an explanation. They didn't explain what the reasoning was to cancel the show.
No, I didn't get an explanation. I don't know if anybody else did. I think A&E just decided to move that direction.
So I'm looking around for different kind of stories on one cause that some of them are bringing up the fact that the events that took place in Texas, March 28, 2019, with Javier Ambler, that was stopped in Texas for failing to dim his headlights in March, and then later on held down and tasered 4 times while a crew from Live PD filmed it. And then Amber died in custody. Footage of the encounter never aired and was destroyed. And later on, Dan Abrams, another host of Live PD, a peer reviewer, says he regrets the footage. And yesterday, the network made the statement. Yesterday or 2 days ago, they made the statement. This is a critical time in our nation's history, and we have made the decision to cease production on Live PD. Going forward, we will determine if there is a clear pathway to tell the stories of both the community and the police officers whose role is to serve them. And with that, we will be meeting with the community and civil rights leaders, as well as police departments. Now, for people that are out there, A&E is owned by Disney, and it's not like it's a small operation here. It's the #1 cable show for quite a long time. So was there some speculation that this is one of the reasons why they said, if this is what's going on, folks are coming out saying because of that, we should cancel the entire show? Or do you think it was more media driving the division of America today? If you were to speculate yourself, is there any direction you go yourself?
I think there's a lot to play here. I think everybody, unfortunately, we're making rash decisions right now. I think We always used to call this, when I was a deputy or an officer back in my other agency, we called it Operation Knee Jerk Reaction. And I think this cancel culture, this virtue shaming, that probably contributed to it to a certain point. I don't know how much that case out in Texas. I hadn't even heard of that case until Tuesday night. I finally heard about that case. And that's standard, though. They get rid of all their footage after like 30 days. So unless an attorney requests that footage, I think this falls more on that side, the prosecutor, whoever it is that was doing that case, that they didn't request that footage. You can't hold a private company responsible for that. They have a policy and a procedure in place, and they just kept following that. So it's sad that the footage was lost. I'm sorry that somebody lost their life. My heart goes out to that family. But it's unfortunate. I don't know that Live PD is to blame for that. You also have the downturn in the economy. There has been a real impact to the entertainment industry as far as people being able to advertise, companies going under. And I think that's affected to a large part the entertainment industry. And who knows, they had just recently signed a big, huge extension to the contract with Live PD. I think it was 180 episodes more. So maybe that played a part. I don't know. I think there's a lot of factors in it. I'm disappointed that it was actually canceled, but I have a belief that somebody somewhere is going to want to pick that show up. It was the #1 cable TV show for a long time. Every Friday and Saturday night coming in at #1. So, and there are a lot of upset people across this country that the show is no longer on. I know a lot of people that only have cable for Live PD. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future. But I am disappointed like everybody else.
Now, let me ask you this question. Growing up, I grew up to cops, is what I grew up. And I lived in LA, and I grew up watching, cops, bad boys. You would watch the show, and it was entertaining seeing the different stories of it. What are the positive and the negatives of having shows like Live PD or Cops on TV?
I think the positive and the negative are the same. It shows what the job is. And so it shows that what we do, and it's not always glamorous, and it doesn't always look great. We don't, like, when we go out and arrest somebody, that's not what we want to do. Like, we don't set out for the day and say, hey, I want to arrest everybody. We actually just want to go out and keep the peace. And that becomes an unfortunate side of our job when we have to actually take somebody to jail for their actions. I think that's what people forget a lot of times, is the reason we're there at that call is because somebody broke the law. And then we have, in many cases, a victim, and we have a responsibility to act on that. So those things are shown in a good. You see our side of it. You see the law enforcement piece of it. You see the good things we do. You see how we handle these cases. But at the same time, we're actually showing you how we handle these cases, and sometimes that can be a negative as well. People don't understand it. They may not agree with it. And right now we're in a crazy world. I don't know if somebody flipped it upside down, and we're only listening to the 5-10% of the people out there that have a loud voice on the bullhorn right now. But I'm going to tell you right now, the majority of people across this country are not feeling the same way. There's polls that show that they did some polls back at a university. It showed that there was over 70% approval rating for law enforcement. They somewhat or very satisfied with law enforcement. And that was amongst different races. That was amongst college graduates. Actually, the rate was higher for college graduates than it was for non-college graduates. So the narrative that police are not doing a good job is not true. It's just what's loud, and it's what the media, unfortunately, is pushing. And they're throwing gas on the fire, and it's unfortunate.
Well, let me ask you this. You saw the footage of what happened with George Floyd. You're in this world. You're somebody that, like when you have analysts in sport and you're watching an NBA game, you got Shaq, Barkley, Kenny Smith, and they're saying, Ernie, hey, if I was them, this is what I would do. If I was them, because that's their world. They're in the world of basketball. If you looked at it from the analyst standpoint, what do you think about what Derek Chauvin did himself, having his knee on George Floyd for 8 minutes and I believe 46 seconds?
It was awful. It was awful. I couldn't watch it. I still don't know if I've watched the video all the way through. And then I've been, I can hardly watch. I was watching Hannity a few days later, and they were bringing up some great points, but I just couldn't watch it anymore. This was a travesty. Nobody dislikes a bad cop more than a good cop. This was a travesty for the entire country. And this was actually something where the entire country was on the same page. We all thought this was awful. And then I think that with what we've seen with the rioting and the looting, I think we've lost the opportunity, or at least we've made it very difficult to really take that where the whole country was on the same page. We lost that opportunity. And now it's, once again, law enforcement, we're trying to recover that. And we're trying to get back to the table with everybody and reassure everybody that that is such a small percentage in law enforcement. It's unfortunate that it exists, but I don't care what industry you're in. There are bad people in every industry.
No question.
And we do the best we can to weed those people out. I would hope that everybody would give us the opportunity to get back to the table. And this riot and looting and what's going on in Washington, this nonsense has to stop, because it is not helping the narrative. It's not helping what these people want to stand for those who want to really address the issues. This riotous behavior is not helping. We had a meeting here in our community where we met with community leaders. We got right to work, and we didn't just talk about it. We pulled them in, and we had a 4-hour conversation where we just talked heart to heart, and I let them vent, and I listened, and I really got a better perspective of a lot of things. And then we also had a lot of takeaways of what we can do better in our agency. That's what you should be seeing across this country. That's the type of dialogue. Honestly, my heart breaks for the Floyd family and for what happened. That was awful, but it's also awful what's been going on since then, and it needs to stop.
What is the right protocol in a situation like that? And how are the 4 officers held accountable? You have the 17-year-old who's recording it and, holding the cops accountable. And then you have the 4. So when you're saying it's awful, what is the proper protocol in that situation? Because we're not in that world.
And I don't like to armchair quarterback. That putting a knee in a back and in the neck is not that's not a technique or a tactic we use here. And even if it was, it's definitely not something you use for 8.5 minutes. Now, everybody else standing around, they got charged. Well, what about the kid holding the camera that got charged? Well, look, he stood around just like the other cops. There were other people that just stood around. So there was a lot of people that should have stepped in and tried to stop this, whether they would have got arrested or not. It's about doing the right thing a lot of times. And I'm not trying to cast blame or take away from anything that happened, because what happened was awful. And you know what? We're seeing that those officers are going to be held responsible for it, and they should. And we need to let the court of law just do it, much like we should have let the court of law deal with George Floyd as well. It just was awful. There's no explanation for it. There's nothing I can say that will justify and you can't show me anything. And this is just me. There's nothing you can show me that would justify that action. What you should have done is, once you had him in cuffs and you got him under somewhat control, they should have just sat him up, crossed his legs. He's got handcuffs on. He's not going to be able to do anything, or put him in the back of the car. Honestly, in most of those times, in those neighborhoods, wherever he's at, you want to scoop that guy up, put him in the back of the car, and get out of a volatile situation. And this is a prime example. That situation turned volatile. That guy sat on that guy, that officer sat on George Floyd for 8.5 minutes. It's so hard to watch. And I wish we could rewind it, but we can't. I tell the youth that I work with all the time, we cannot change the past. The only thing we can do is work for a better future.
Yeah, that's good perspective to know, because all I want to know is, I want to know protocol. There's something, obviously, there's something wrong about sitting on a man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and you got the handcuffs. What is the right protocol so that behavior is going to be judged in the future if somebody else decides to go that route? The question I had for today, we were having lunch yesterday, and I said, do you think these events that are going on the last 2 weeks, I'm in the military, I'm about to get out. When you're going through ETSing, you go through job offers. And there was a police, Fort Lauderdale Police Department was hiring for $32,000 a year. And this is 1999 June, and I'm thinking about taking Fort Lauderdale PD. So then I come out and I'm thinking about going and becoming an LAPD. Obviously, I told you why I did, and I had 16 speeding tickets, and apparently they don't like that. But, are these events, do you think these events inspire more kids to say, oh man, I want to go be a cop because I want to be a good cop? Or do you think it gets people to say, dude, I definitely don't want to be a cop and I never want that job? What do you think it does to the application rate of new people wanting to become police officers or get into that world?
It kills it. The hiring was already hard enough. The parameters that are set, for example, let's take your situation where you had 16 tickets. That immediate, you probably would have been an amazing cop, but because of those 16 tickets, we couldn't bring you on. And you would have had to have put some time in between you and the cop. And in that time, you go get another job and you end up in a different career. Now with the legalization of marijuana in other states, where it's legal in Colorado, well, if that kid smokes more than 20 times and comes to Arizona and tries to be a cop, guess what? We can't hire him. He's immediately disqualified for life. There are certain situations that prescription pills, those types of things, they disqualify you for life. It's making it hard emotionally too. I know a lot of good cops that are considering walking away from the job right now because they feel they're not appreciated. I had a girl just before I got on your show, 10 minutes before, I was messaging a gal that I had met at a Starbucks who had gone and got into the law enforcement career. She's 9 weeks into her FTO program, and she is questioning whether or not she made the right choice. And I said, you did. You made the right choice. Now's not the time. When times get tough, that's not when you bow out. This is what truly makes a person is when it's tough. And, we took on this job. We knew that it was dangerous. We knew there'd be hard times. And your time when you leave this earth is predetermined by God already. So the best thing you can do is live like a lion, live bold, live proud, live with your head held high. And there's nothing greater than living like a warrior. Most people will never do that, will never know that. And for all of you who are in the law enforcement profession, I say, hold the line. Don't let these situations that what we're going through right now discourage you. And please don't let it discourage you from applying to law enforcement. The pendulum will swing back. I was watching a video today where these guys were throwing stuff at vehicles, and this guy stops his car and he backs up the car and he gets out of the car. And the first thing these little cowards say on their video is they say, somebody call the cops. So these people who are protesting and throwing junk at people's cars, the second somebody stops them and tries to hold them accountable, the first thing they go to is somebody call the cops.
Automatic reaction. I mean, that's what you think about. I always say I can't stand cops pulling me over, but you love it when cops are there when they're, you call 911 and, they're there within 5 minutes. You feel safer when they're there. So it all depends on the situation you're in. I also had a friend of mine who was a cop, and he told me something one time. He says, Pat, I said, tell me what it is to be a cop. This guy was a bodybuilder, and this is years ago, 20 years ago. I got out of the military. We met at Valuetainment, and I couldn't become one. He went and became one. I said, let me ask you, how is it becoming a cop? Because every time I saw his chest getting bigger and he was getting a little bit more, a power trip, if you want to call it. We go to a nightclub, he bring his gun with him, and he'd give it to the security. They put it out. I'm like, there's something's changing with this guy, and eventually, by the way, he ended up being fired 5 years later. They fired him as a cop. He got terminated, and he, had to go change his career. Do you also see sometimes people who, when they wear that badge and they have that gun, it sometimes gets to their head? And if it does, how do you filter those people out versus those who actually want to serve?
I'm glad you asked that question, because every one of us knows a badge-heavy cop. And there's a lot of guys that do it. And I'll tell you, sometimes what creates that is the things that we see, the things that we go through every day. You have to start really checking your emotions at the door. But that's also counterintuitive to being a good community police officer. When you go and you see a baby that's been raped, that affects you. When you go and you see people, domestic violence, where a husband and a wife have beat the crap out of each other, or a husband who's beat his wife within an inch of her life, that stuff takes a toll on us. Now, some guys handle it well and some guys don't. And some people are badge heavy. I used to say before I became a cop, cops are two types of people: those who did the beating up in high school and those who got beat up in high school. Either way, they typically have an axe to grind. And that's unfortunate. And we as administrators have to our job is hard to try to weed those types of people out, to really get the right people for the job. Now, when I had my community meeting the other day, they said, Sheriff, you got to get rid of the bad officers. And I said, I can't. It's not that easy. It is hard as hell to fire a bad cop. I have to put paper on this guy over and over and over again. And then you fire them and they get their job back because we have strong unions that support it. Now, on the other hand, having said that, I want to also say something on behalf of the officers and the line level guys. The reason they've unionized and the reason why we have an officer's Bill of Rights here in Arizona is because of the distrust that exists between them and bad administrations. There has been bad leadership in law enforcement that has created distrust within their own agencies with the line level guys that have been treated misfairly. And that's why you have an officer's Bill of Rights. Well, that same thing also, it makes it difficult for me to weed out the guys or any other administrator to weed out the ones that we know could be badge heavy or are on a collision course with something like this. So this is something we deal with every day. We're not ignorant to it, but these are some of the challenges we face. And it was great to be able to explain that to some of our community members because they didn't know that. They didn't understand that piece of it. And so in that open conversation the other night, they were able to talk to us and we were able to talk to them about some of the protocols in place and different things that contribute to this. And we would love more than anything to have every call go exactly perfect, but it's just unfortunate it doesn't. But the reality is the statistics show that we respond to 50 million plus calls in this country every year as law enforcement. And a very, very, very small percentage don't go right. And it's unfortunate. And most times that might cost somebody their life. But this is a hard job. And if it was easy, more people would be out doing it. And these same people that are out protesting right now, they don't have the balls to come out and do this job, most of them. So, and I'm not talking about the peaceful protests. I'm talking about the people doing the rioting and the looting. They don't have the guts to come out and do this job or the courage to come out and do this job. And now they're questioning us. We've seen, what we saw, I'm going to go back to it, was terrible. And I think every law enforcement agency across this country is reevaluating their own agencies to make sure this doesn't happen at our agencies. And we're doing the work already. You don't need to go out and tear everything up. It's not necessary.
Yeah, it's getting a little out of control. You're seeing the Christopher Columbus statue, and then Cuomo comes out and he says that was not the right move because he had a very big effect on the Italian community, and we can't be doing that. And even Cuomo, who's somebody who is supporting the protesters, took that position saying he's not comfortable with that. The badge-heavy party we're talking about, you gave a very example. Either those who were bullies and those who were bullied chose to become cops, and you don't know how to control the badge-heavy folks. I had a challenge with, we were having this debate with a group of people and we were talking about teachers. And I said, tell me the best teacher you ever had. My teacher till today, Miss Sinclair. I joined the Army because of this lady. She's 4'11". She was my health and guidance teacher. She inspired me. I went and became a soldier after high school. I had a 1.8 GPA, but she changed my life. Mr. Woods, Miss Sinclair, there's a list of them. Till today, we write letters to each other. But the concept of tenure, that you have where a teacher goes in, does their tenure, they can't get fired, they don't have to do a good job. It's not like it's the private market where you don't do your part, you get negative reviews, you get terminated, you get fired, you're worried about what if I don't perform. How much of that also applies to the world you're in, and what can change to hold cops more accountable moving forward?
A lot of it applies. Now, there's certain states, I know there's sheriffs in, let's say, Missouri, North Carolina, they can fire a police officer at will, for anything. And that creates a tough spot sometimes because people, if you decide you don't like a guy just for personal differences, you can fire the guy, and it's not fair to him and his family. But at the same time, they can fire somebody that they see as a bad cop too. And the other thing that we don't have in place out here that some people are wanting as a reform is some type of database that where if a guy gets let go from another agency, we can look in and find out about that. Everybody's been burnt by that, where you hire a guy and you think he's going to be good, and the previous agency didn't tell you about all the problems he had because nobody didn't document it, or citizens who would call you and complain, but they didn't actually follow through with a full-on complaint. So there's no paperwork on that. And then what happens is an agency like mine might pick up somebody that's carrying a bunch of baggage that we didn't know about. So I think there's ways that you can do that. A database, and I don't know how accessible you make that database, but a database, at least for people hiring, that we can see whether that guy's had some previous issues. You maybe have to, you're going to have to sit down with some of these unions and talk to ways, reach out to them and see what ideas they have to weed some of these guys out, give us some more flexibility there without losing the trust of our line level guys, because that's the last thing I want to do is lose the trust of my people as well. So there's a lot of tough conversations that need to be had on all sides of the fence and on all sides of the table. And we've got to do it, and we've got to start now. And hopefully we can get to where we make this better. It's not going to be overnight though. Like these things take time.
I agree. I agree. I just would love to see how that dialogue is going to take place, because the biggest thing would be you have two sides. I run an insurance company, 15,000 agents, and have folks who are calling me, telling me, Pat, how can you, not see it? That this is how can you not see? Then the other side gives their side. But if both sides, they have some reasonable arguments on both ends, if progress is made on both sides to make some kind of a form of being held accountable, I think trust would go up. Trust goes up, peace comes right afterwards. But then even that leads me to a different topic here is, how big of a role you think media is playing right now in dividing America and turning, issues that are important, but turning them into a way to make sure they divide so we get more eyeballs watching media? How do you view media yourself?
The media is almost, I don't want to say they're fully responsible, but they need to shoulder the brunt of what's going on here. They have instilled fear into the American public. They were doing it through the coronavirus situation, and now they're doing it here. And the politics is so blatant, it's not even funny. If you can't see the politics and the underlying agendas in what's going on here, then to any of your viewers, I challenge you to please open your eyes and start to look at what's going on. Look at the things that are happening, or the things that were swept under the table during the last 3-4 months, when we went from coronavirus and then we rolled into this situation here. The media has to stop instilling fear into people. And they're making the American public think that this is the majority that you're hearing from out on the streets, and it is not. And I think you're going to start to see a lot more pushback from the average American citizen. They're trying to undo our president, which is shameful that people would hate this country and freedom so much to undo a president. Look, I didn't appreciate the president President Obama. I didn't agree with hardly anything. I didn't think he was a good president at all. And I think it's showing through now. But at the same time, I didn't go out and raise hell because of it. I did it. The way I did it is I decided to run for sheriff. I decided to get politically active to be able to change my country. I didn't do it the wrong way. And what we need is media that starts to go back to true journalism, to report the facts, and to stop instilling fear into the hearts of the American public. So I don't like to cast shame, but shame on the media. They've done a terrible job.
It's a travesty at what they're doing to divide to get eyeballs. The whole divide and conquer model is fine if it comes down to other areas, but to divide and conquer a nation to get more eyeballs is as divisive as it can get. The word defund the police. You hear this, defund the police, defund the police, defund the police. Well, it worked in Camden, a city outside of Philadelphia, 70,000 people living there, but Philly's got 1.7 million people. They used to have four cops in Camden, but they decided to get away, and it's more a local militia, and they have a certain system that they're using. What does the word defund the police mean to you? What is your interpretation of the request that's being made from the protesters of defunding the police?
It's ludicrous, and it's a talking point for people who hate this country, who dislike our president, and they've put it in these hearts of these people. Most of the people out there asking to defund police have no concept of what they're talking about. You're talking about the police across this country have been defunded. You want to know what the problem is? And I did a video about this, and it's been up to like 1.5 million views. It's weak leadership. The problem's where you have issues with law enforcement have been places like Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, places that have decades of piss poor leadership, people who have gotten away from protecting their communities. They use politics. They are they divide races, and it's predominantly from the left. Look, I don't typically get into politics, left or right. I try to stay away from that. But there's no question, if you can't look at all these cities that are struggling with their relationships with law enforcement, they're almost always been run by decades, 100% run by people from the Democrat Party. And their solution is, instead of taking responsibility for their failures, now they say, well, let's defund the police. And they're talking about giving more money to programs. They're already blowing money on programs that aren't working. And that, in many of these places, they need to be actually putting more police officers in place. Defunding the police and taking police officers of the streets are going to kill these communities that are most affected by what these people are out protesting for. This will kill these communities. Less police will only increase crime. It'll only increase, you're going to have neighborhoods that people will not want to go to. They will become literal war zones. Honestly, it's ludicrous. What we need to do is we need to make sure that our police are appropriately funded. We need to make sure that we have school resource officers back in school. We need more money for police programs that we can go out into the community. I have a youth redirection program. I have to fund that with my charity or with RICO funds because I don't have the funding for it in my budget. And you know what? I've had 100 kids come through that program, and instead of being charged and going through the court system, they were able to wipe their slate clean. And out of those 100 kids that have gone through, 0 have reoffended. It's programs like that are going to change our communities, and the money that we should be dedicated should go to those programs. So we need to do a better job on our end, but defunding the police is it's honest. And even in this meeting, I'll end it with this question, but even in the meeting I did with our community members the other day, I said, what do you guys think about defund police? There wasn't a single person in that room who thought that was smart or who thought that was a legitimate answer to the issues. What they all asked for was reform. And one thing I said is, you have to be careful in this country not to throw a blanket of reform on the entire police, every agency across this country, because a lot of us are doing it right. We do have safe communities, and we do have excellent community relations. So you can't just throw a blanket on every police force in this nation, because the majority of us are doing it right.
It's interesting you say that, because the question that comes to my mind is, okay, let's just say defunding police is taking a portion of the money here and investing it into the community, kind of like what Mayor Garcetti is saying. We're taking $150 million outside of the police department in LA, and we're going to put it into the communities, and that's what we're going to be doing. The first thing I think about is, how long does it take to change a community or an individual? Here's a 1.8 GPA kid at 18 years old, knucklehead. If you gave me $1 million, I'd probably end up in prison, or I'd be in Vegas doing the dumbest things for a span of a month until I ran out of money, because I'm not capable to be given $1 million, right? But gradual change of shifting, working, improving myself. Then I go from somebody that all my friends' parents didn't want me to be around. Now those parents are calling me, telling me, can you call my son, please? Can you call my kid and talk to them? How long does gradual change really take place in a community?
It takes time. I think you're a generation away. I think that you start with your youth now. I think you've got to start with your youth. As you get older, 40, 50 years old, there's things that I'm never going to change your mind on certain things.
Yeah.
And you've got things that are ingrained in you. And we can do the best we can to hopefully offset that. And maybe, but with the youth, we actually have a shot. We can actually really, because that's what the left's doing. They're trying to indoctrinate this youth. The people with this agenda that hate America and that want to take away your freedom, they've understood that, and they've worked for decades to recondition the minds of our youth. We need to get back to instilling good American principles and values and the things that this country was built on. We need to start that with our youth. And hopefully by the time they have kids, that we have in that generation, we've gotten back to where we need to be. But I honestly believe it's going to take a generation to fix it.
Well, that's good to know when you say generation, and it starts with the youth. It's always started with the youth, and I think about it with myself on how it happened. Somebody got a hold of me early, and he believed in me, and she believed in me, and gradually poured into me and encouraged me to change. And then I became a different man that you wouldn't recognize from 25 to 18, and then positive progress takes place. And I think it does take some time for that to become a reality. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm assuming, I'm speculating that somebody out there is probably going to contact you guys to get that show back on live PD, because it is very hard to get 2.1 million viewers of people that want to watch the show. And even more than that, there's a form of accountability if we can see what you guys do as a cop. If we can, as sheriffs, if we can actually see the handling of it, you are essentially being held accountable. So if I'm a betting man, I'm betting someone's going to be interested on the show here soon. Sheriff Lamb, where can people find you?
Yeah, after this show, people may or may not like me, but if you like me, come to sherifflamb.com. You can. I am running for office again this year. It's unfortunate that I got to do it every 4 years, but I really do love America. I'm a patriot at heart. I'm a God-fearing man. I love my communities. I work hard every day to put community programs in place to avoid situations like what we saw in Minneapolis. I really work hard to be out in the community. You see that I'm the sheriff, but I put on the vest and the badge, and I go out and I work with my guys. I believe in leadership by example. And I think that America needs more strong leaders. And we need people that will accept responsibility for their failures and that will work hard to make the changes when they do. That's true leadership. That's what we're lacking in this country. That's what we're lacking from these people, these mayors that keep wanting to put the blame back on the police officers when they're really at fault for their failures over the last several years. That's why people are moving out of those states and coming to places like Arizona, because it's a great place to live. So hopefully people will go check me out, sherifflamb.com. I also have a charity, americansheriff.org. We just try to do good in our community. So thank you, Pat, for having me on today and allowing me to talk about these things.
I appreciate you. I know your job is a tough job. It's not an easy job, and it's probably 10 times tougher today. So thank you for your service, and thank you for being a guest on Valuetainment.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless you as well. Thank you. Obviously, this is a very sensitive topic that not everybody has answers to, and I'm trying to figure out what is the right approach to this. What do you do to make it better for cops to be held accountable? What do you do for the citizens to gain trust back with police? What does the police need to do? I mean, it's a very, very complex situation, so I want to hear your thoughts about today's interview with Sheriff Lamb. And I did an interview in the past with Bernard Carrick, the former commissioner of NYPD, during a time, he cleaned the streets of New York. Crime went down. Him and Rudy Giuliani worked very closely together. And we went through the game plan of how they did that in the city of New York. So if you haven't watched that interview, click over here to watch that interview with Bernard Carrick. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.